Zombies. Even at the tail end of the zombie boom in media, they're everywhere these days, with like a dozen different Walking Dead spin-offs, and of course there's The Last of Us too. But what if zombies were actually everywhere? How would an actual zombie apocalypse play out? Well, this is What, Why, How, and that's what this video is about. If you like it, consider subscribing and becoming a patron. Okay, so before we get into the apocalypse, we have to design our superbug. In most movies and shows, the zombie virus can only really be transferred through biting, at which point the person dies and is reanimated as a shambling brain muncher. In The Last of Us, the zombies are inspired by the Ophiocordyceps fungus, which infects bugs and hijacks their little bug brains. They don't go cannibal though, and this type of fungus really only infects bugs. In 28 Days Later though, zombies come from a rage virus. That's a little more promising. Now in real life, the thing probably closest to any zombie virus is rabies. Rabies is spread by saliva, so bites. Human cases of rabies come from bites by infected, aggressive animals or by the consumption of those animals. There's never been a confirmed case of human-to-human rabies, but the virus could be transferred that way. After somebody's infected, it can take anywhere between a few days and a few months to take hold. It causes a whole slew of symptoms, including aggression, confusion, hallucination, and most uniquely, hydrophobia. It eventually progresses to delirium, coma, and death. If you get rabies, you need to get treated quickly or you die. Bingo, that's our zombie plague. We just need to tweak it a little bit so that infected people are more aggressive, like rabid animals, and so that vaccinations don't work with the new mutation. Ideally, the virus would be spread before symptoms set in too, through saliva contact, that sort of stuff. This is not too much of a stretch since there's already a few different types of rabies viruses. All it takes is a little mutation of the virus and the problem gets a whole lot worse. Okay, so we have our zombie virus. On July 25th, 2023, a mutation occurs in the rabies virus as it multiplies within an infected dog in Delhi, a world hotspot for rabies. The extreme virus passes among the stray dogs of the city before several young children are attacked by the dogs. One survives an attack on July 29th and becomes patient 0. He's treated, but symptoms still develop. As he's transferred to a different wing of the hospital, he attacks a doctor, breaks free, and attacks several other patients before being cuffed by policemen on August 3rd. Doctors lock up the people they know to be infected, but they miss 2 who spread the virus to their family members on August 6th and August 7th. From there, the virus spreads exponentially every 4 to 5 days. 9 people have the virus by Saturday the 12th, 18 by Wednesday, and so on until there are 500 infections by the end of the month. At first, the rabies attacks look like random fights breaking out across Delhi, but soon officials realize that the attackers prefer biting and that those arrested show symptoms of mental illness and disease. It takes until mid-August for scientists to realize Delhi has a rabies epidemic on its hands. That week, international newspapers report of a rabies outbreak in India, or maybe major riots, or maybe religious violence. People are confused. But these reports are buried under the usual celebrity drama, political scandals, and movie reviews, just like Indian rabies outbreaks usually are. On August 20th, Delhi announces a campaign to address the outbreak. Police and civilians are called to purge the city of its stray dogs. Bringing people out into the streets in big crowds, however, only facilitates the spread of the virus further. Meanwhile, doctors begin a vaccination campaign for those who might have been attacked and need treatment. However, over the next week, they discover something very worrying. The vaccinations don't appear to be effective against the new rabies strain. Instead, people are locked in their rooms until they wither away, thrashing against their binds, or they're on the loose, spreading the virus even further. On August 30th, the Indian government intervenes in the crisis and orders a citywide lockdown in the Delhi metropolitan area, with policemen blocking exit points with shipping containers. But by then it's too late to stop the spread of the virus. It already has reached other major Indian cities, including 20 cases in Jaipur and Agra each. International governments also block flights from Delhi, citing the health emergency. But little do they know, it's too late already. New Delhi Airport has dozens of flights to distant cities scheduled for this coming August. All it takes is one infected person to be unaware or uncaring about their infection to fly out of India to some other country during the virus's incubation period. Let's say that this infected person flies to Hamburg, Germany. They use their savings to get a bed in a hostel where the infection takes hold the next night, with a fever and other symptoms beginning at midnight local time. When they wake up in the morning, they're overcome by rage and attack and bite their fellow travelers before being shot dead by local police. Those who have wounds receive medical attention, but all it takes is someone to be missed or for one of the infected to bite a nurse, and the virus begins its exponential growth in a new city. Similar outbreaks begin over the next weeks across the world. Countries don't know they have it yet and react slowly, shutting down airports when it's already too late. The fires of infection start in the Middle East, East Asia, Africa, and the Americas. In America, a person infected by the disease in Italy flies to JFK Airport, then spreads the disease among their family. Countries across the world impose lockdowns and vaccination campaigns. Just as in India, these are ineffective to combat the virus. Documented cases skyrocket. The infected suffer from rage, paranoia, hallucinations, delusions, and gradually, over the weeks, paralysis, coma, then death. Those who become infected are unaware of their mutilated state, so their wounds rot with bacterial infections. They are the raging dead. Police round up these thrashing husks on the streets and in apartment buildings wearing riot gear and improvised chainmail, but it's not enough. Murders and infections skyrocket. Back in India, the virus continues to spread with the government announcing a nationwide mandatory lockdown. Death tolls skyrocket into the thousands, then tens of thousands. The virus overwhelms a system unprepared for the infected to ragefully spread their disease. As the outbreak burns through the world, it becomes clear that these aren't riots, aren't religious violence, but this century's Black Death. So, how would governments handle this zombie pandemic? Taking lessons from the previous pandemic, governments across the world used the strategies that worked the last time around: masks, lockdowns, and government-funded vaccination research. But masks don't work against rabies, while rabid or panicked people won't pay attention to lockdowns. Plus, people need to go to the supermarket. Expect those to be a hotspot of attacks. Meanwhile, many people contend that the pandemic is a lie by the government, or sell fake vaccinations or cures. They neuter the government response. In this early phase of the pandemic, those countries that have low population density, fewer international entry points, and more effective central governments would be better off. That means places like Greenland and New Zealand, which are isolated islands with effective governments, would be best off. Places like China, Singapore, Bangladesh, Lebanon, and of course India would be a lot worse off for a variety of reasons, including population density and government stability. Expect major unrest and riots in those countries as governments use desperate measures in a futile attempt to stop the spread. Countries in the middle are a toss-up. Judging from how the US and Brazil handled the last global pandemic, though, I think they'd have major outbreaks. As the disease spreads, places like New York and Rio de Janeiro plummet into strife, with policemen and soldiers using desperate measures to control the city streets in the face of swarms of rabid people. Refugees flee throughout the country, spreading the virus further. The rapid spread of the disease brings an end to liberty in fragile democracies. Legislatures and elected leaders either surrender power or are overthrown by militaries across Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. Across the world, hospitals begin to turn away patients. The only effective treatment people realize is a bullet. Governments begin to use extreme force. The first to do so is Syria. The government bombs the overwhelmed city of Aleppo to dust once more. Countries like China and Iran follow suit, using their militaries to purge anyone who acts suspiciously or fails a rabies test. Russia evacuates its soldiers completely from Ukraine to do so, dropping cluster munitions on major cities as leaders bury themselves in bunkers. In the United States, the US Army attempts to launch a counterattack through New York City, but the assault grinds to a halt in street fighting. The infected don't behave like normal people, and therefore conventional weapons are ineffective. Rabid people don't shoot back, they just keep coming, teeth and claws, until they can't anymore. The US Army retreats from New York City, defeated. The virus reaches cataclysmic levels, at least doubling every few days as it burns through densely populated cities across the world. Cities like New York, Jakarta, Seoul, Buenos Aires, Cairo, Paris, and Damascus crumble into anarchy, with survivors on their own against rabid hordes. As the coastal swaths of America, including Washington, D.C., plummet into bloody anarchy, Joe Biden relocates the government to the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, a nuclear bunker in Colorado. He urges people to remain in their homes and to turn over infected people to the relevant authorities and to keep calm as casualties skyrocket. As the situation grows more dire, military regimes and authoritarian governments cease distinguishing between the infected and the uninfected. In their logic, they're all already dead. By killing them now, you can stop the spread. So they bomb cities and massacre millions of civilians in the largest bloodshed since the Second World War. Russia is the first to deploy nuclear weapons, incinerating Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Rostov. China follows suit, demolishing most of Shanghai, Beijing, and Guangzhou, adding 40 million to the death toll. Western countries publicly denounce such violence while mulling over their options. In America, the Joint Chiefs begin proposing the nuclear bombardment of New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago to save the rest of the country. Biden refuses. Instead, the Army attempts to enforce an immense defensive line along the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River. Crossings are destroyed by the Air Force. The Army militarizes the river. The plan is to wait it out. The virus will burn through its available prey no matter what, but the question is who's on the menu. It's a cold winter in the Northern Hemisphere. With power grids gone for months at this point, people burn what they can to stay warm. Many pass away either from the cold or from starvation due to depleted food stores. Cannibalism rises in some parts of the world, especially in African countries that rely on food imports. The spread of the disease slows, but not because of any government action. The virus has literally burned through the population of urban centers and must now ooze out into rural areas. The countries that fare the best in this new period are not necessarily those with the strongest militaries, but those with the most soldiers or policemen per person, as those forces are able to wage war against their people. That means the governments of countries like North and South Korea, Eritrea, Cuba, Cyprus, Taiwan, Israel, and Vietnam keep the most order, but countries with massive militaries like the US, Russia, and China are able to survive better than those with smaller militaries. In the Americas, the countries of Panama, Costa Rica, and Haiti completely fall to the disease because of their small military forces. In Africa, Gambia, Liberia, Niger, and Mozambique crumble too, with local survivors taking up security of isolated fiefdoms. Iceland, notably, is overwhelmed completely when the virus gets there. In Asia, Bangladesh reaches its end, sinking beneath a sea of rabies. The governments of the world find themselves in a desperate struggle to maintain grip on narrow beachheads in their own countries. But, mercifully, the disease begins to burn through the wave of victims, with the number of infected people declining for the first time. Battles continue across the world, though. Imagine them more so as massacres, like Tiananmen Square, or riots, with soldiers keeping hold of fortified highway passes or guarding the banks of rivers. Governments turn the tide of war, marching into depopulated areas and depopulating them further. Civilians are conscripted into the total war effort, with people cycling between active duty and the disposal of infected corpses. Black smoke rises into dark skies over cities which once were the hallmark of the decadent modern age. Still, the militaries make progress. By Christmas, most militaries that have survived have reclaimed their capitals in bold campaigns. America retakes DC on November 16th and New York on December 12th. The French flag is raised again in Paris that same day, while the Russian military claims Moscow to be rabies-free a few days later. However, large parts of the world still remain in anarchy. The virus survives where people continue to live without strong militaries. Secondary outbreaks burst out in Brazil, Nigeria, and Thailand in December, but are mostly contained. The death tolls across the world number 4 billion, but people aren't really sure of that at the time. Militaries continue their operations while the international effort to discover a vaccine continues. A major breakthrough is made in January, with an effective vaccine for the virus discovered by the end of the month. Companies across the world begin to churn it out, but distribution is a major hurdle since much of the world's population is dead and supply lines are irreparably damaged. distribution of the vaccine is the next major challenge for the world. A new world order takes shape. The old ways are done with, for the most part. The trend of democratization has been reversed, with no democracy in the least to be found in the militarized regimes of South America, Africa, the Middle East, or Asia. The traumatic experiences of the virus, plus the heroism of soldiers, gives rise to radical fascist regimes hell-bent on keeping absolute order. Scapegoats for the mass casualties are identified. Pogroms occur in Europe again, with South Asian people and Middle Eastern people being killed in large numbers in the US and elsewhere. Old border disputes, meanwhile, are reignited as rivalrous countries seek to take advantage of the chaos. The Chinese Navy moves quickly, sinking its regional rivals and taking control of its neighboring seas. Serbian soldiers occupy Montenegro, while war erupts between Greece and Turkey over Cyprus again. Countries that have fallen are absorbed by their neighbors, giving rise to new empires. Those that handle the virus the best skyrocket in power. Cuba becomes a regional rival to the US, while Israeli tanks roll into neighboring lands. Civil wars erupt as well in dozens of countries between rival military bands. In Russia, ultra-communists and ultra-fascists duke it out over whether to restore the Soviet Union or the Romanov Empire, dividing the country and splitting its nuclear weapons. The world has sunk into a new era of bigotry, war, and murder, a dark age that will last at least another century. But there is hope. The foundations for the prosperity and progress of the modern age are still laid down. There just needs to be a reconstruction. Technology and democracy have not been forgotten, they're just in a lengthy winter. One day spring will come, and with blaring trumpets, human civilization will enter a new renaissance. But what do you think will happen? Comment below.